Good day, my friends. Today's chess lesson is going to be interesting. I just want to show you a more reliable and effective way to handle the Scotch Gambit or the Scotch game in 2025. Yes, I have so many videos on the Scotch and how to crush it. Other serious Scotch lines are also included in my E5 defense course. You can check it out on my Patreon page or on my website, casperchess.com. White starts with pawn to e4 and then you go e5, then knight f3, knight c6, and pawn to d4. At beginner level and intermediate level, this is one of the most aggressive openings you're going to face. And it's very confusing, I should say, if you don't know how to handle this. Sometimes if I want to run away from theory, what I do is just taking on d4. Not objectively the best, but it is playable. Trust me, most of my opponents take on d4, after which I do this. And there's a little trap where you can win white's 3 pieces after queen takes and knight e7. Some people play bishop g5 in an effort to pin your knight to the queen, and also just provoking some weaknesses like f6. But here you can just go knight c6 anyways, so that if they take, you just emerge with a clear piece up. Look at this. Anyway, this is not the main area of our meet in today's video. I just wanted to show you a funny trap that's called the Lolli variation. But I want to show you something that you can use in serious FIDE rated games, in tournaments, and also in bleeds. After pawn to d4, I always advise to take the pawn. In fact, this is the main line and something that I advised to do very often in my E5 defense course. But there's a slight update that I want to make, knowing that there are many ways to kill a rat. Knight takes d4 is called the Scotch game, but bishop c4 is called the Scotch Gambit because white just gambited the d4 pawn. So let's start with the Scotch Gambit. If bishop c4 is played, what I advised to do earlier is to go bishop b4 check, and then find a way to put your dark squared bishop on b6, which is okay, and then develop your knight on e7, castle short, and all that. But to play this line like a professional, you have to study some theory or watch my E5 defense course. Besides, there's this other annoying line where white plays pawn to c3 after bishop b4 check, and then after you take, they don't take back, allowing you to reposition your bishop to this other square. Here they just castle short, and this can be so dangerous, especially if you don't know what you're doing as black. So after d4 and pawn takes, then bishop c4, what do I recommend for today? How do you continue playing like a professional, like a grandmaster? Well, I recommend the move knight f6 this time. This is a professional move. In fact, the top played move even in the masters database, as you can see. Now, the first move that you should think of whenever you play knight f6 is pawn to e5, obviously. And this is why most people fear to play this move. But I want to tell you this. Think of this line in the same way you'd think of the Budapest. What do I mean? If white plays pawn to e5, you don't play d5. That's confusing. You just go knight g4. Now, kind of the Budapest, and there's little or nothing that white can do about this pawn. In most cases, we take it back. The main line goes as follows. White usually castles short, offering you to take the e5 pawn, which you shouldn't do due to rook e1, rook pin, knight takes, and pawn to f4. Right? But there's a move you can play here. Remember that white gambited a pawn on d4, so why not gambiting your pawn as well? In fact, if white takes, the game will be equal. If h3, now you can safely play knight g takes e5, and you don't have to worry about this pin on knight takes because you are just simply going to connect your pawns like this. If this, you play bishop d6 and castle short. That's why pawn to h3 doesn't work in this position. After you play pawn to d6, again, if white plays rook e1, maybe an intermediate move, you can just go ahead and take back like this and play bishop e7 castle short. Again, if knight takes, you always want to take back with a pawn. You don't want to take back with your knight due to pawn to f4. Anyway, pawn to f4, here you can play bishop d6, trying to take back, that's okay. But there's a more interesting line here worth remembering. Bishop b4, which attacks the rook directly. The plan is to invite pawn to c3 so that now we put our bishop on c5. So we're just one move away from giving a discovery check. For example, fe doesn't work now due to dc. This is a discovery check. If bishop e3, by the way, you have queen takes, bishop takes with check, and then win the rook on a1. Simple math. This is what is happening. If king h1, again you have queen takes, and after rook takes, you simply go pawn to c2 and boom. So bishop b4 is another tricky move, especially in positions like these where white manages to play pawn to f4, attacking your e5 pawn. So you don't have to memorize these moves, just keep this position in your mind. Just know that bishop b4 is playable in this position. Sometimes you can try bishop e6 as well, so that if pawn takes, you take that free bishop, right? But what if they take you? I mean, that looks like a long-term positional mistake. But anyways, after fe, you simply go queen d5 in an effort to get back your pawn, right? Oh, but what if black plays queen h5 check? You have pawn to g6 and bishop e7. You castle long. So in most of these Scotch Gambit games, you'll be castling long. Back to the initial position of the Scotch Gambit, where white does not take immediately on d4. Once again, just go knight f6. This is the main line. If pawn to e5, you always want to think of the Budapest where we play knight g4, double attacking this pawn back. Again, the main line, castle short. What do? By the way, anything. You can do anything you want. For example, bishop e7 is also a decent move here, because you know if pawn to h3 comes, again you can just take back on e5. This is even the simplest, by the way, I should say. Bishop e7 is even a more stable move for beginners, I mean, who are afraid of pawn to d6. Again, the good part of bishop e7 is that it renews a direct threat of recapturing on e5. If you think about it, we saw what happens if white plays pawn to h3, you just recapture on e5. But what if they protect the e5 pawn thrice? Now these are moments where you want to play pawn to d6, which is why super grandmasters start with pawn to d6 first before playing bishop e7. Say, why pawn to d6 now? With pawn to d6, you are not just paving the way for your light squared bishop, but you are also preparing for knight g takes e5 and then recapture with your pawn, followed by bishop e6 in the near future. Remember, so that's why you play pawn to d6. Are you giving up your pawn? No. Again, remember white played a gambit. It's called the Scotch Gambit. So you're just trying to equalize material, giving back a pawn. If pawn takes, theory states you should take back with your c pawn, but you can just go ahead and take back with your queen. And this is just a normal game. Everything is well defended, not to mention that you are up a pawn once again. So pawn to d6 is the medicine. Oh, say bishop g5. f6 is okay, but if you play pawn to f6, be prepared to castle long, which is what I advise to do in the Scotch Gambit most of the times. Also, knight f6 is decent. You know that if bishop takes, you take back with your queen anyway. And still castle long if you want, or just castle short. So these are all the ideas that I'm giving you. New stuff, right? So in this particular line of the Scotch Gambit, it's up to you to choose which line you want to go with after pawn to e5 and castle short. Either the pawn to d6 line or the bishop e7 line. I gave you all these options just to discourage memorization. Oh wait, not too fast. After you play knight g4, this Budapest move, there is one funny line I want you guys to know. See that your Budapest knight is not defended yet. This is just move number 5. You haven't yet played pawn to d6. White hasn't yet castled short. So sometimes what white players like doing is sacrificing their bishop here. This is just a little trap that you can handle. The whole idea is if you take, they then give you a check with their knight, discovery on your other knight. So the safest you can do here is putting your king on g8. Even on e8 it's fine, but I just like this. I mean, if you think about it, there's no immediate checkmate coming. There's no checkmate, as you can see. They usually play queen f3. Yes, they can take, but with queen f3, they just want to, you know, give a check on any of these highlighted squares or checkmate you like that. In fact, this should not be underrated. Moves like queen e8 will run into something like queen d5 check, and you have to give up your queen. So this should not be underrated. Even knight takes doesn't work due to queen d5 check and that. So the only thing you need to remember in this particular line where white takes on f7 is to free up your dark squared bishop first, not caring about your knight. So you go check. Yes, they are going to play c3. Now that your f8 square is free to be occupied, this is when you can play knight g takes e5 or anything else that you want. Knight g takes e5 not only attacks the queen but also stops checkmate on f7. So black has no time to take your bishop. Yes, they can play queen d5 check, but remember, that's the reason why we moved our bishop first. We wanted to create some room for our king. See that our knights are beautifully defending each other, and this is where you're going to see most of your opponents taking your bishop. Sometimes they play pawn to f4, we'll look at that. But after this, you simply have a simple continuation, knight d3 check. By the way, if king d2 just attacking your thing and also threatening to checkmate, you can simply go queen f6, again preventing that checkmate. Worse off, if king takes d3, now it is you who was trapped or tricked your opponent like this. Anyway, even if white plays king f1 after knight d3 check, you still have to play queen f6. f3 may be played. Again, you play knight c takes b4, attacking your opponent's queen. Sometimes they might play knight e4, but you have queen g6, just staying closer to your madam in case of anything. And this is coming, maybe pawn to d6, and that. Anyway, not to mention that white's dark squared bishop is free for grabs. So I just wanted to show you one nasty trap that most white players like playing in this line. So once again, the Scotch Gambit, just play knight f6, if pawn to e5, go knight g4. You know what to do. If bishop takes, you just take and put your king on g8 for safety. Then think of playing your key move, bishop b4 check. Now, after you play knight g4, intending to get back your pawn, what if white just takes on d4 first? Well, again, the purpose of playing this Budapest move is just to get back the pawn. Remember that there is no pin this time. This knight also attacks the last squad bishop. For example, if white foolishly castles short, you can just grab that free piece. It is free, and then play bishop e7, castle short. Anyway, they play knight takes, and then you can take back, play bishop e7 and castle short if you want. But theory suggests you take back with your d pawn if you want to be ahead in development. Yes, they will do this, but at the end of the day, it is you who is ahead in development, attacking the bishop. They play bishop b3, and then you play bishop d6. If you're strong enough, you can continue playing in this manner. Last line in the pawn to e5 line, where you have to play this Budapest move, knight g4. What if white tries to hold on to their e5 pawn, not allowing you to recapture it? Say this time they play bishop f4, what do? Once again, moves like bishop e7 in this particular position will be too slow due to pawn to h3. Remember, the goal was to take on e5, so that's why you have to give back a pawn to d6. This is what theory suggests. Your friend played a gambit, so why shouldn't you, give back a pawn? In fact, this is not a gambit. You're just paving the way for your light squad bishop and also creating room for knight g takes e5. What if they take? That's the idea. You just want to take back and attack that bishop. Oh, if queen e2, first you can play knight e7 if you really want to castle short in the near future, that's okay. But if you ask Magnus, the move that he would play in this position, king f8. This is the safest thing you can do. Anyway, white's bishop is still under attack. They play either bishop g3 or bishop takes, it doesn't even matter. And this is when you can take back and develop normally. Again, if pawn to h3. Speaking of tactics, this is where most of us differ. Here, I wouldn't play an obvious move, which is knight g e5. I would play something like bishop d7 straight away, so that if my opponent takes, I pin their queen to the king. This is what we mean by tactics, simple tactics. I know that knight g e5 is an obvious move, so that can wait. Anyway, just wanted to show you one or two things. So once again, you guys, never be afraid to play knight f6 in the Scotch Gambit. With knight f6, not only are you developing your minor piece, you are also threatening to capture on e4. And the other good part of it is you are always going to see pawn to e5 in most cases. There are a few cases where white just castles short. In fact, if this happens, you just take. Yeah, this is the theory you have to know. If they castle short first before pushing pawn to e5, you just take. That e4 pawn is just a free pawn, by the way. If rook e1 is played, you can just go pawn to d5. There's absolutely nothing that white can do to take advantage of that. You're attacking the bishop. Yeah, there's this other line where they take on d5, and after you take back, they play knight c3. Why knight c3? Because they know you can't take their knight due to queen takes. These are just some of the traps you need to be aware of. So the best you can do here is to play queen a5 or even queen d7. That's okay. With queen a5, you're telling white to take on e4 like this, and now you go bishop e7 to avoid any discoveries. Sometimes people play bishop e6. In fact, bishop e6 is the most advised move. Reason you want to castle long. I mean, in this particular Scotch Gambit, you always want to castle long and start attacking on the king side. They play knight eg5 if I'm not mistaken, trying to win a pawn, but this is why you can just castle long, and after knight takes e6 you just take back. After rook takes e6 you simply go bishop e7 or bishop d6, but I love bishop e7 because you want to put your bishop on f6 and also preventing this from happening. So this is the theory behind this. You just want to play an open game. Besides, material is equal. White gambited a pawn in the opening stage and you gave him back that pawn. How about this fried liver move? As always, you'd have to play pawn to d5, but the simplest way to avoid this is just to play knight e5. This is how we neutralize most Scotch Gambit attacks. You just want to take the bishop. They play bishop b3, and then you play pawn to h6, and then after knight f3 you just take, and after queen takes, theory says you should play bishop d6, not pawn to d6. Sometimes you can start with bishop b4 check. After pawn to c3 you take because you want to walk away with the discovery. If knight takes, you play pawn to d6. If pawn takes, this is when you play bishop d6, stopping pawn to e5 and also preparing to castle short. Once again, to conclude this video, I still stand my ground with knight takes d4 to avoid all Scotch Gambit traps. You can also stick to my top recommendation in my e5 defense course, where you put your dark squared bishop on b6. But speaking of the Lolli variation, the advantage of playing knight takes d4, in my opinion, is that you just simply get rid of all useless Scotch Gambit traps and you just want to play chess. For example, in this position, white can't even play bishop c4 due to knight takes f3. Pap, after queen takes, you simply continue with your normal development and castle short, not worrying about any Scotch Gambit traps if you think about it. Yes, there's something like queen b3 here, but you simply have queen e7 if I'm not mistaken. The e4 pawn is under attack. If they play knight c3, you know what they want to do, so you just go pawn to c6. And who knows, maybe someday you'll play pawn to b5, that's why they play a4 to stop that. And now you just switch to the other plan of developing your dark squared bishop here and castle short. This is the beauty. Or just play pawn to d6 so that if white castles short, you play bishop e6 to try and neutralize this attack. And then you take back with your f pawn. This is all playable, by the way. Your b7 pawn is defended by your queen. How do you develop your dark squared bishop? You will simply play queen d7, bishop e7 and castle short. For example, say bishop g5 by white. h6 is okay, by the way, followed by pawn to g5, but here I would play d5 and next maybe d4. They do this in the hope that if you blunder by taking with the queen, they can then take on b7. So this is why you need to be careful a little bit. If pawn takes, you just take back with your e pawn, everything is under control and you will castle long, play rook g8 and continue attacking. After d4 and knight takes d4, if white takes your e5 pawn, once again, just retreat your knight back to e6. That's the beauty. They play bishop c4 most of the times for some reason. I don't know why. But here you can just develop your king's knight while attacking the e4 pawn. They play knight c3. And then every move comes with tempo. Bishop b4. You want to do this. If pawn to f3, holding on to their pawn. You can even mess up their pawn structure on the queen side first. In fact, what I like to do. And then play pawn to d6. You don't want to entertain your enemy's pieces in your territory, or just castle short. It doesn't even matter, to be honest. This is how you get rid of all the unnecessary traps of the Scotch Gambit with the Lolli attack. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, why not sharing with others? Because that's how we grow this channel. Besides, you can subscribe if you haven't already and like this video. Remember to leave your comments in the comment section. Bye.